November, 1, 2, 3. Equipment. Correction.
Hello, dear listener. Welcome to People We Know, a podcast for my friends and family about my friends and family. Today, we're talking about air traffic control with my brother, Toby. In his own words, I am Toby, Salad's bruda. I live in Southern California with my wife and two kitties, Radar and Henry. I do exist, and prison in Kansas was nothing to what I'll do to anyone who hurts my sisters. I have 8 years of ATC training and experience working in the Caribbean and California. So, that's my brother. I think that's pretty much it. Enjoy the show. Hi, Toby.
Hello, sister.
You're my brother.
I am your brother. I was gonna do like the fake Russian stuff, but I think that's a little overblown.
You exist. A lot of my friends don't think that you exist.
I always loved like coming home and being like, "Hey, I'm from prison and
I
I'm
know.
coming to like murder people," and like I always thought that was kind of funny.
Yes, very funny. Loved
It's
that.
it's never not funny to pick you up from like school or something like that, blaring like the Soviet national anthem.
Yes,
That was always a
yes.
fun time.
That was a good time. But yes, because I do think, like, for my friends, you're this, like, monolith that is all they know about you.
Right? I'm not.
They're
I
like, I
wasn't
think it's a
really.
joke.
Yeah. No. I'm with you. That's funny.
But you're not from prison. You're
No.
an air traffic controller. Ooh, segue.
Ooh, segue.
Oh, but
Yeah.
actually, unsegue, what's your favorite book?
My favorite book is funny enough the same as my grandmother's. It's To Kill a Mockingbird. Um,
Yes.
I was I listened to your podcast because I am a good big brother sometimes,
Aw, yay.
and I was trying to come up with a different answer than Grandma for a long time about why it is my favorite book, and I really don't have a good answer. I really just think it's one of the better Americana tales that we have in, just in like American literature. It's
Mm.
Atticus is such a cool, interesting character, and the way that she writes the book, Harper Lee, is that it's so poignant. There's like every chapter has like this like alliteration or like this like meaning, deep meaning, and it's one of the books it's one of the weird things that like in high school, funny enough, that my teacher was like, "You're gonna read this book every year," and I'm like, "Yeah, whatever. It's a high school book. I'm never gonna read it every year." And sure as sandals, I read it every year.
You read it every year still?
I I still do. I haven't read
Oh.
it this year yet because it's just starting, but I read it a couple months ago, and yeah, I still think it's one of the best books ever written.
That's interesting because I hated that book. And, well, I didn't hate it, but I didn't find it very interesting. But I think, I was 14, and I think if I came back to it, I might.
Yeah,
And I'm
it's
also
not.
not a rereader, so
Yeah,
that's
I
too
I
interesting.
it's a lot of media. I will rewatch something once a year. Like I probably go
Hmm.
through MASH once a year. We're going the odd my darling wife and we go through Star Trek just about
Oh, really?
every we go through like the different series, but we're going into Deep Space Nine soon, and then we'll probably jump back to Voyagers, which we started with like 2 years ago, and
Oh.
we'll just keep rewatching it because we're homebodies.
Yeah. Well, I rewatch stuff. Like, I've been watching Grey's Anatomy for years, and I rewatch Fleabag like every 6 months. But I
Fleabag.
don't
I've
reread.
never heard of Fleabag.
Oh my god, you have got to see Fleabag.
What's Fleabag? What's it about?
Oh my god, it is like it's just. Oh god, it came out probably 2019 or so. It's
Okay,
Phoebe Waller-Bridge,
that
and
I don't know names. I'm old now.
yeah, I didn't know her until this show, but she's like she wrote the show, and she's also the main character, and the main character doesn't have a name. She's just Fleabag, and um, she is like I think she might have like a sex addiction.
Oh,
Uh huh.
spicy.
But and she just also like kind of is like this unlikable but also so likable main character. Like
Interesting. I'll throw it
she's like,
on the list
yeah,
with Audrey and I. We have the endless list of TV shows we need to catch up on. So
it's so good, and it's very she talks to the fourth wall a lot, which is like
okay,
super
I like that.
fun.
It's I mean I think
Hmm.
Scrubs was the show that I liked that did that a lot.
Yeah, I also think it's good. I don't know, feminist like
Oh, that's right up
TV.
the Darlin' Wife's alley. So we'll get it on the
Yeah,
docket for sure.
and you need it. It's like vegetables for you because you're like a filthy man.
I am a degenerate patriarch. I don't know. I know.
Anyway, okay, so now remember that really good segue I had. You're an air traffic
Yes,
controller.
I am. I am an air traffic controller. I currently work at Joshua Control Facility, which is
Okay,
in the Edwards Air Force Base in the middle of the Mojave Desert, northeast of LA.
cool.
Yes.
And by the way, your house is fine
My
and
house is.
you've
Oh
survived.
yeah, we live in the mountains in a near, well, not really near, honestly, but we live in the mountains of LA, and we love our little mountain house.
Yeah. And it didn't get burned.
It didn't get burned, thankfully. There's been
Yes.
a lot of that lately, and unfortunately, it seems like it's only going to get worse. But we're safe for now,
Yeah.
and uh, kind of a little weird is that it's because everything's so burned up here. I don't know if we're really it's not going to be bad for a bit because everything's burned. So
Oh yeah, there's nothing to burn. Yeah. Oh
yeah,
man.
but yeah, no, I started air traffic control roughly what is it 7 years ago now.
That's when you went to school or
That's
when you started
that's when I
like
went to school. And before we get too much further into this, I do have to do the little disclaimer here. These
mhm.
views are my own. My
Mhm.
opinions are my own and do not reflect the FAA or NATCA. All right, now that the
Yes.
legalese out of the way. So, yeah, so if do you want me to just jump into the story, I guess?
Please. Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. So, when I got out of college, I decided I didn't want to move back to Texas. Not because I didn't want to go to Texas, but I was really kind of. So, when I was in college, the number one thing I wanted to be was a high school football coach because I played football for
Mhm.
12 years, ever since I was 12 or so. And
Mhm.
I was just really into football, and I really thought I mean, like when you're a little kid in middle school, I was like, I'm gonna go to the NFL. No, you're not. No, you're not. You're just a little bratty kid who thinks they know everything, but you're just not.
Mhm.
But I got into college on a scholarship for football, and then when I
Hell yeah.
finished, I did an internship in Kansas City with a high school out there, and for the internship, I really enjoyed it, but at the end of it, I was kind of like, I really respect coaches and teachers, but it wasn't for me. There was a
Mhm.
lot of like the fun parts of like seeing helping and seeing like a student and a kid grow was a lot of good
Mhm.
fun, and it was like great, and we felt good about it, but the everything else surrounding it was kind of just a little too much. Just
Like,
like so, like I'll tell you a story. So there was a kid on the team that I was an intern for, and I was like their offensive line coach. So I was
mhm.
kind of like I just really just worked with the offensive line, a little bit on the defensive line or whatever. But this kid was, his dad in town was a ne'er do well, and that kind of like a little just he was the town drunk, to put it kind of
Mm.
bluntly.
Yeah.
And the kid would come to practice, and his dad would be in jail for the night before, and
Mm.
that's a lot to deal with when you're just a dumb little college student,
Yeah.
and I think I helped that kid as much as I could, but there's only so much you can do, and that was just a lot of emotional stress on me. So
Mhm.
it kind of that influenced my decision a lot to not really do that. That and then like,
I
go ahead.
well, I feel you. Well, when I was student teaching, I don't know, something that irked me about that was um, the kids would come in and have all sorts of things going on at home or whatever, and then you'd be expected to you know, yell at them and discipline them and get them to practice, and it's
Right.
I don't want to do that.
Yeah, it was more of like I wanted to be the fun coach. I didn't really
Yeah.
want to be, in lack of better terms, their father. You know, like I couldn't
Right.
give that to them. I couldn't. I wanted to be their friend, but I couldn't do that. And it's just what it was, you know.
Mhm.
So, anyways, I graduated college with my sport management degree that I'm definitely using now. Um,
Mhm.
uh, but I graduated college and I moved to Kansas City and I picked up a call center job for
Oh
um
yeah.
a,
Dial a
a
prayer, right?
well
Oh.
I actually did that in college, funny enough. That's
Oh,
a
okay.
whole other, that might even be a whole episode in itself. But yes, I did
Oh,
work at a dial up prayer and I've got a bunch of stories for that. But yeah, so because of that job, funny enough, I did an interview for a call center for like credit card fraud for a
Mhm.
bank.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh
because I
yeah.
had that experience and I shared some stories, they hired me on the spot basically,
Oh,
which
that's
was,
funny.
that was cool. And then I went and I worked in Kansas City at the call center for a while, but I was kind of just like, you know, it's after college you'll experience it a little bit too, is that there's just a little like kind of like floating or like kind of just like
Mhm.
you don't really know. You kind of had one idea when you went into college, but then afterwards you don't. You know,
Mm.
you're kind of just floundering a little bit. But you know, I got a good job. I got a decent job and
Mhm.
worked and did all that, and I even tried grad school for a little bit and then flunked out of that. But that's a whole other story too. Um, but it was one of those things that I was just kind of like, whatever. And I was home for Christmas or something about 9, 10 years ago. And I had tried a couple times in college to do the ATC or air traffic control kind of sign up thing. So the way
Mhm.
that like the FAA hires air traffic controllers, it's a little bit different now, but what they would do is they hire what's called off the street. And these
Oh.
are people who have no experience, have no idea anything about how aviation works or anything like that. And they have a bid for that where like something like I think like 5 or 10,000 people apply and they pick names out of a hat, you know, basically. They randomize it and there's some luck there. And then you can also go to what's called like CTI, which is like it's a college for air traffic control, and that gets you like a better
Mm.
chance. Think of it like as
Mm.
like a lottery ticket. You're adding like you're getting another line or something like that. You're getting like
Oh, okay.
10% better odds of getting in. And then with like CTI, you can go do other stuff too. Like we have a good friend who's a dispatcher, which is like they make sure like you know like for a company you have to have certain people like go through and be like this plane needs to be here, this is how much gas it needs, how is it going to fly, what's
Mm.
the weather like, all that.
Yeah.
um but so some people do CTI and get in, and that's what my darling wife did. I think that's how she got her.
Oh, I didn't know that.
She's got some aviation stuff. She was a dispatcher for a while as well, because that's kind of like it's what you do is you go to CTI school, you apply for FAA, and if you don't get in, you do CTI or you go do dispatch for a little bit, and then you keep
Mm.
applying. And the age cutoff is 30. So when you turn 30, you can no longer apply. So it's kind of just
Mm.
like a lottery thing to get in. And
Mhm.
really, the only reason we know about ATC is obviously our mom and pop.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, I'm
yeah,
laughing because mom's spiel she gives to every 20-year-old person that she knows to apply.
it really is like doing it for a while now. If you are young and you kind of don't know what you want to do, it's great. I mean, I go
Yeah.
to work, I don't take any of it home. It's a great job. I mean, there's obviously parts that could be better. It is a stressful job.
Mhm.
Nobody's going to say it's not, you know. I
Mhm.
mean, I work. with passenger airlines every day and fighter jets and all types of cool stuff. But if
Mm-hmm.
I, it's like a video game, but if I lose,
Die.
people are in danger or people die, you know. So you kind of
Yeah.
have to be on all the time, and there's a couple caveats with that, but you know, it's not like incredibly stressful, you know. It can be, but you're never. It's a good job, you know. And if you're under 30, always be on the lookout for it because I'm gonna be like my mom here for a minute. It's a good job. It's not. It's a
It is a good job, yeah.
good job. It's a good government job with a pension. I mean, what more could you want? You
Money,
know,
benefits,
right?
health insurance, yeah.
All the whole 9 yards. Yeah. But yeah, so like mom and dad, like they're like, well, why don't you try for ATC? And I tried once or twice, I think 2 times before the most recent one, or the one in what I applied for in Kansas City. And then I applied in Kansas City, and then they sent out what's called a tentative offer letter, and this is the Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You got the golden ticket. You you are hired. It's an offer letter. You sign it and send it back, and they say, okay, well, whenever we have a class available for you in Oklahoma City, we'll send it to you, or we'll get you in there.
Mm.
So that's kind of that. And then yeah, so you apply for it. You kind of cross your fingers. You hope for the best. Oh, there's a whole like, so you apply for it, and if they like you or they think you're okay for it, you go take what's called an ATSAP, which is like an
Mm.
air. It's like a standardized test for, you kind of like you play like a video game on like a computer, and it's like two dots are heading towards each other, and then they ask you to do like math problems at the same time,
Okay.
and they're like, are
Oh,
these
okay.
two dots are gonna hit? And there's like spatial awareness stuff where like they've got like a guy in like a T pose, and it'll be like on his head, and then it's like which way is he facing, and all kinds of like stuff to go through your deductive and like smart reasoning, you
Mm.
know. So you take that, and then if you pass that, you go take the MMPI test, which is
Mm-hmm.
like a, it's like a personality kind of like to make sure you're not crazy test. You're
Mm-hmm.
like sane. It's kind of weird,
Yeah.
but like the one question I remember on the test is like, do you like fire in a sexual way? It's really weird.
Oh,
It's like and then like, do you think
that's
of,
interesting.
yeah, and it's like it'll ask you like the same question 5 times, 5 different ways to make sure you're not lying about it. Like it'll ask you like ridiculous things. It's
Oh.
like, do you want to set fire on things? And you're like, no. And then like the next question will be like, do you want to see the world on fire, or does burning things make you happy? Like, and it's just trying to find out if you're lying. It's
Oh,
it's it's re-
interesting.
really kind of weird. But you
That
take
is
that,
weird.
and then if they decide you're not crazy, they you still go to that final lottery, and like you kind of just hope for the best. But
Mm-hmm.
I got my TOL, or the tentative offer letter. There's going to be a lot of acronyms here. I'm sorry.
I know. I was like, oh my god.
There's a department in the FAA that just comes up with acronyms, and they're bad. They're just bad. But so you get what's called a tentative offer letter. You send that back in, and when you send that back in, they're like, okay, well, we'll find you a spot for a class, and then once we have a class, we'll let you know to when to report to Oklahoma City. And when you get a
Mm-hmm.
tentative offer letter, it's kind of like, all right, in 2 weeks you have to be in Oklahoma City. So you're like, wait, what?
Yeah. Yikes.
You kind of just
This
have
is, it
to,
seems like such a weird, counterintuitive way to do it to
yeah,
me, but
yeah, there's a lot of weird stuff with the process, but you know, I got in, so I can't really, I'm not really gonna say it was wrong, you know, but
mm-hmm.
there is definitely some criticism of it. So yeah, after I got my TOL, I was still working at the bank in Kansas City, and mom and dad called, and they're like, "Well, you got your TOL. Just quit your job and move back home." So that way,
Mm-hmm.
because we live in Dallas, it's not
Yeah.
like a, you could just go to Oklahoma City, and then just you could
Mm-hmm.
just live at home for a little bit. I'm like, "Oh yeah, it'll be like a month or whatever, and I'll be in Oklahoma City." 6 months later, uh,
I
yeah, yeah,
remember this, and I thought it was awesome because you were home.
yeah. No, and I haven't after college, or it's definitely during college. I didn't really spend a lot of time back in the house, so
Yeah.
it was just kind of what life kind of throws at you, you know. But
Mhm.
I was like, cool, and I got a security guard job with good old Austin.
Oh
that,
yeah.
that was I sat and watched security cameras all day. That was fun
Ugh.
for that was that's a whole nother chestnut. Anyways, but like I remember so going back to Kansas City a little bit. I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but I remember
No, no worries.
working at the call center at Kansas City for like credit card fraud, and I was like, I never ever want to work a job where I'm like talking on a phone ever again for like most of my day. Like this is
Oh,
awful. Like this is
how
just like
stupid you were.
little did I know that I was going to do that for a career. But that's just my funny little anecdote. But yeah, so anyways, we get the TOL, and then you get like a date for a class in Oklahoma City, and then you have to like kind of figure out housing there and how you're going to get there and all that fun stuff. But yeah, I showed up on Sunday, moved in, met my roommates, I got all ready, and then you wake up bright and early because they got you there at 6 a.m. the next Monday morning, and
Mm.
then I met Professor G. Uh, that's like so when you go to the academy fresh off the street, you get you basically get forced into called like basic aviation or basics
Uh-huh.
is what they kind of refer to it as, and this is like everything from this is how an airplane flies. This is how
Mm.
maps work. This is the globe is a sphere. If you put a string here and you put a string here and you pull it off the globe, the string is straight, but it's like longer, but it doesn't look like a straight line from New York to California, you know.
Right,
It's
right.
very like I remember like there was a bunch of questions about like Bernoulli's principle, which is the like if you have like flowing water and you put your like if you have a garden hose and you put your thumb over the garden hose, the water comes out faster, and that's how
Mm.
wings work. Basically, is that there's like the curvature on the top of the wing makes that air move faster over the wing and slower under the wing, so that causes lift. And then there's the
Oh.
whole yeah, and then how do airports work? Like these are the certain lights that mean the certain things on the airplane and the airports, and how to read weather. Like there's a whole like month basically just to like how to read
Mm.
METARs, which are like the airport equivalent of like the local weather report.
Mm.
Um, so that's all that fun stuff. And then at the end of basics, there's the big basics test. So you have to
Right.
pass basics to get to like the real air traffic control stuff. And that
Okay.
test is not that bad. If you study for it, it's not anything, and it doesn't really count towards your final grade. And I passed it, and like I remember I'm like doing the test in the room, and I go up and they tell you like right then and there if you pass or not, because like at the
Oh my
academy,
gosh.
if you're not actively student or anything, a security guard shows up, you grab your stuff, and the security guard escorts you out of like the the school.
My
Like it
God. Did
is
you see that happen to people?
yeah, we'll get to that later during
Oh.
the final evaluations, but yeah,
Oh my
that's
gosh.
like it didn't. Nobody failed basics. It's really
Right.
hard to fail basics, and it's kind of just like the litmus test of like if you're even like interested in the job, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But yeah, so you go through basics. I passed basics. I go up to like the proctor and like she like looks at it and she's like, "You got a 95." I'm like, "Phew." And she's like, "Did you think you weren't gonna pass?" Like she was like mad at me. I just remember like she was like, "You dummy! You of course you passed. You paid attention all the time and did the stuff. You know you're."
Aw.
She was it was funny. Then we go your class of we had a class of 18, so all 18 of us passed basics, and you go for a month, and the first month is this is what a radar looks like. This is um, the commands prompts to put on the keyboard, and this is how to see what dots are. These are what like data blocks look like. So like when you look at like air traffic control stuff on like a radar scope, you'll see like a dot and it'll be like American 123, and then it'll be
Mm.
like the type of aircraft, how fast they're going, how high they are, and other information like what point in the sky is he direct to, and to kind of like just like at a glance see like, oh, this guy's going this way, so you don't try to put somebody into him, you know.
Right.
So you do that for like a month, and then what you go into, I think they actually removed it from the academy now, but we went into what's called non-radar, which is
Mm.
separating aircraft without a radar. So you have like a board in front of you with a bunch of strips of airplanes, and you have
Oh.
to like, this route is the route that you're flying is fine, or it's not fine, or this altitude and this altitude match these guys are going to hit, that needs to be fixed. And it's kind of like, it's almost like a paperwork math problem, if it's the best way I could
Huh.
describe it.
Is this like the analog way to do it, like before they had
This was, yeah,
radar?
before well, radar's always like, air traffic control didn't really like, the modern ATC didn't really kick off until like the 60s. So
Mm-hmm.
in World War II, that's one of the things you learn in basics, is the airplanes in World War II were having trouble, like when they had radar, they were having trouble trying to identify which planes were ours or which planes were the bad guys, right?
Mm.
So they came up what's called they called it the Parrot system back then, but it's the Beacon system now. It's like these 4-digit codes, 0 through 7, and each code like is a different one. So basically, it would be like code 0123 is that particular airplane. That was
Mm.
like, you know, the way that like radar works is the plane has squawks a code, and the other on the ground we go, oh, 0123, that's American 123 or whatever, right? My
Okay.
Yeah, it's so funny enough, Sally and I grew up children of air traffic controllers, and air traffic controllers
Nice.
throw a lot of jargon and a lot of like nonsense out, and you sit in the back seat of the car. I mean, I think my favorite thing was like, parents would use like the phonetic alphabet when they wanted to talk about, is it time for Bravo Echo Delta, and you're like 6, and you don't know what that means, and you're like, I don't know what that means, but I don't like it.
Something doesn't feel good here. I
This
remember thinking like, there's a non-zero chance our parents are like spies, agents, because I was like, the way they talk is so like, I don't know.
Yeah. I like, my mom's favorite story is that like when I was like young, like kindergarten or something like that,
Yeah.
it was like the teachers were like, well, what do your parents do? And I'm like, well, my dad talks to airplanes and like make sure they get to their destination safely. And they're like, oh, that's really nice. What does your mom do? Oh, she just talks on the radio. It's just like,
This is why
yeah,
you have to watch Fleabag. You
this
need
is
to
why
unlearn
this is
all of
why
your.
I'm a problematic male and all that. But yeah, so yeah, not to get too technical, because it's the technical side. It's interesting to me. It's not interesting to everybody. But long story short is that there's equipment and stuff that we can know which plane is which in the sky, and we have it displayed visually on on what's a scope, and we can know that green dot and that green dot are safe when they fly over each other because it's a different altitude, or whatever. You got to keep everything separated by 1,000 feet and 5 miles, which sounds like a
Mm,
lot, but it's not. So,
mm,
anyways, yeah. So non-radar, I did all right in non-radar. I didn't like, because you're the whole time you're in like the actual ATC part, you're chasing like the point total is you gotta look at like 101 points is like the max score you can get, and you gotta get like 70% of that to go anywhere to actually pass the academy. So
mm-hmm.
you're chasing points, like you have like a map test, and you have to draw like every 200 points on a map with like all of like the routes and different intersections and which airport's which and which airport has this airspace around it that you can fly through, or you need like to work out with the tower controller and all that. So um, and then non-radar you get points, and then there's like a weather test that you get points. But the big thing is the third phase of the academy is the radar portion, and you're not actually at the academy, you don't really actually work the radar. Like you're not the guy in the seat. You're what's called a
Mm-hmm.
D side, which is the
Mm.
guy right next to the radar. And the D side watches the scope and what's called they watch what's in front of them, which is another screen that's more or less like this is all the airplanes in the airspace. This is their flight plans, and you kind of look at the radar and say, hey, this guy needs to descend 1,000 feet. This guy needs a different routing. This guy needs to go that way. There's weather over there. Have you pointed that out to that pilot yet? They're
Mm.
getting close to the other sector over there. They need to point out over there. You're kind of the assist to the radar, and you're
Okay.
more or less kind of going through like all of that. And that actually goes on for quite a bit. So like the academy in total is like half a year. I think I started in March and went to like August. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So like this is all like over like 7 6 7 months. So you're getting
Mm.
like towards the end and you do the radar portion, which is it's hard. It's part of like you're stressed, you can't lose points. You're going
Mm.
crazy. You're
Yeah.
it's a lot at the academy. I mean like just like on our first non-radar problem, we had a guy in our class not even do it because he was too stressed and just went back home. Like,
Oh wow.
there's also a lot of like, there was, I mean, we knew a couple people in our class that were like very low scoring. So if like we
Mm-hmm.
knew that like if they were a point or two behind, they weren't gonna make it. They were gonna get escorted out and fired, like right there on the spot.
Oh wow. You get paid this whole time, right?
Yeah, you get paid and you get per diem, which is they pay for your housing and your food.
Oh, okay. Okay,
So
cool.
it's not like it's nothing crazy. I think they give you enough for a couple months rent and
Mm-hmm.
food, and then they pay you on top of it. But I think it's like 30,000 a year. It's nothing. It's not like
Yeah.
it might have changed. It's it's been almost 10 years since I was there. So
Wow.
um
Yeah.
yeah. Then so we're going into we'll get to the fun story, I guess. Unless you have any questions.
um. No. I mean, it's all confusing to me. So.
Yeah. Well, like as I've told you many times, it took me like 3 months of the academy to even be like, oh, that's what our parents do. Like I can
Yeah.
understand what they're talking about now. And that took
Right.
3 months of like training and like classroom to like even get to that. Oh, I can understand what they're doing.
Yeah. It is so funny how like yeah, our parents and then you and your wife do
Hmm.
it. So it's me and our sister against the world. And I have vowed to her that I am never going to air traffic control school because I won't leave her behind. Anyway,
Yeah.
go on.
No, yeah. It's definitely interesting. Yeah, shout out to Audrey, my wife I met at the academy. We weren't
Yeah. Woo.
woo. We weren't really like dating. We were really good friends at the academy, but like the way the academy works is that at the end, depending on how well you score in the class, if you pass or not, you're going to completely different destinations. They kind of go off need. So if like Fort
Mm.
Worth needs two controllers, that'll be the top two spots on the list. Albuquerque needs something, whatever. They'll go top down. If you score number one in your class, you get your first choice, second, whatever, right? But so we were
Right.
good friends with the academy, but we weren't really like we were like, oh yeah, well, good luck wherever you go. Like we didn't think we were gonna
Mm-hmm.
get to where we wanted to go. So you kind of go through this class, and it's a lot of stress. It's a lot of like if I don't do well, it's gonna be bad. I'm just gonna, like it's just gonna be you're flunked out. You got to go. You don't get to try again. That's the other crazy part is
Oof.
you kind of if you flunk out the first time, you can get back in, but it's very hard. So you only really get one shot at it. So
Mm.
that's a lot of fun as well. So you're stressed on that, and it's kind of like this tinderbox where they're really trying to press you to see if you handle it. Because how are you
I
gonna
was about
if
to
you
ask, like, do you think they kind of engineer it to be stressful so that they weed out the people who can't?
Yeah, I think they do. It's more or less so they can push, just like they will put you in a situation. Like they say you're 100% comfortable with the situation, they'll throw 150% at you to see how
Mm-hmm.
far you can go. That's just part of the
Right.
academy. Like every day you run like there's like 3 weeks of problems, and problem one is like 2 planes, problem two is like 15, and then problem three is like four people are in the air and they need a flight plan, and there's 20 planes, there's an emergency, there's just like a bunch of stuff. Like it ramps up really fast, and then it kind
Mm-hmm.
of comes back down right before the evaluations at the end to kind of like get you some confidence. And then the
Mm-hmm.
evaluations are like, so you go up to like 120% of what's like what it's expected of you, and then you go back
Mm-hmm.
down to 100 for your evaluations. So
Okay,
it's like
that's good.
they're pushing you over the top because they kind of want to see that, and then it really helps you when you get back down to like the lower stuff.
Yeah.
So you're going through these problems, you're stressed out, and then so like out of those 100 points or 101 points you get, the last three evals you do. So you do three problems without your instructor, with like an FAA like bigwig, well, not like an evaluator who like watches you, who's been like in the FAA for like 30 years, and they're like, you know, you get 60, I think it's like 60, 70 points. It's like it's almost like more than half of your grade to do these evaluations. So you're
Yeah.
stressed, and then we'll finally get to the story here. Is that so? I walk in to this first evaluation, and I sit down, and I'm like, you're nervous a little bit or whatever, and I run the problem. I'm a little shaky. I don't think I do that bad. There's definitely stuff to improve on, but I'm like, yeah, it wasn't my best problem, but it's not like the end of the world or anything like that. And the way that the evals work is that you go over 2 days, and the first
Mm-hmm.
day you luck of the draw if you're going to go one problem on one day, two problems on the next, or two in one. And I
Mm-hmm.
unluckily got, well, I guess luckily now looking back on it, I got the one problem on day one and the two problems on day two. And
Mm-hmm.
I was like 30 out of like the 31 points you could get so far. So I was feeling pretty decent, I was like, I'll be all right, even if I
Mm-hmm.
fail this eval, I'll be able to claw it back in the other two, and whatever. And the instructor looks at me and he's like, "Well, how do you think you did?" And I was like, "Well, it wasn't my best work, but I think I did all right." And he's like, "Well, you got a 3." And I'm like, "A 30?" No, he's like, "No, a 3 out of 100 points possible."
Oh,
And like
so
that was
heartbreaking.
soul crushing, Like it's just
Yeah.
like, oh no, I have to be perfect on these next two. And
And
it
like, people don't get perfect grades on these, right? Isn't the
mhm.
average like, what
Yeah,
is it,
the
60
average
something?
is like a 60-70. These are
Yeah.
hard things. And like I kind of thought maybe I was even in like the 40-50 range, and then like when he said 3, I was like, "Oh, 30, that's not good, but that's still recoverable. It's not
Mm-hmm.
great, but I can make it work in the next couple problems." But he said a 3. And part of the fun
Mm-hmm.
part about evals too is these guys and these people you work with that you've become good friends with, like my wife, and like a couple other people in class. We're really good friends. We still keep up with each other, but like you're like you go back to the class, or they do them over the course of a day. So like you get back to they come back out of the eval room, and like I remember my buddy Levi in class, he came back and he's like, "I feel bad for y'all have to stay here." And he packed his bag, and the security guard walked him out. Like a guy that I lived with,
Oh.
roommated with, and he did more studying than my other roommate and I combined. And
Yeah, but it's a weird set of skills, is what I'm
yeah,
told.
it
And you
it
kind of just have it or you don't.
yeah. And yeah, and then so out of the 18, well, 17 people in the final eval, because we lost the one right before non-radar, out of the 17 people we had left, we lost 7 in the first day. So 7 of
Oh
your
my gosh.
good friends, so you do like a college class with these guys, say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you lose 7 of them on the last eval, and they're gone. They just get escorted out, they're fired, they got to go home. Like that's it. So that happened. I looked at the like they do the numbers for you, and they do the math, and they're like, "Well, Mister, not or Mr. Toby, I guess. I'm sorry. Uh, I guess everybody knows your last name, anyways. They would figure out mine. They're like,
It's okay.
Miss.
I get to choose a fun bleep noise
Okay.
later.
Uh, they're like, Mr. Toby, well, you're not mathematically eliminated, so you can come back and try again tomorrow. And I'm like, oh, great. And I'm like, just like, ugh. Like, I
Yeah.
call mom and dad and tell them, I'm like, hey, I didn't do good. Probably coming home, That's just, I didn't, whatever happened, happened, And so, like,
Mhm.
after the first eval day, the rest of us that are still alive, quote unquote, um,
Oh God.
we go home, and they're like, all right, well, let's go to Buffalo Wild Wings. And I'm like, okay. So we're like having like this sad depression meal, but we're all talking like
My
it's
God.
all three problems are the same for everybody, but they're all like shuffled around. So like I'll get problem one
Mm.
for my first one, and somebody will get problem two for their first one or whatever. So we're all sharing like the tips and tricks of like the problems that we had, and I'm talking with people, and I'm starting to get like a little bit more. And we finish out, we go home, and I'm kind of just like, well, I guess I should start packing. I don't know what to.
Oh
I'm
my
just not
gosh.
gonna make it. Then Dad called, and
Hmm.
if you know our father, he's a great father, but he's not one to
Mhm.
like, hey, cheer yourself up, champ, you'll be fine. But he gave me like
Mhm.
this 15, 20-minute pep talk on the phone that was
Oh.
like just like this, like, you're gonna do fine, man. Like, don't worry about it. You're gonna,
He
whatever
does
happens,
like when it counts. Yeah, Dad can give a mean pep talk.
right? So yeah, he gave me one of
Oh, I
those,
didn't
and
know that he did that.
so yeah, like I remember getting one like after like a football game where I didn't do that well, and it was very similar to that. But I was like, all
Mhm.
right, you know what? After that phone call with Dad, I kind of just sat there on the edge of my bed, and I was like, F it. I'm gonna just have fun with it tomorrow. Not gonna worry about it. I'm gonna have no stress. What are they gonna do? Fire me? I'm already half fired, right?
Yeah.
So wake up. I have the early problem and the last problem. I have like the first problem we're gonna run that day and the last problem. And they kind of did that if you were on the border, so you didn't have to stay all day to get fired. So I was like, it's like that. What's that Brian Regan joke where he's like going to the spelling bee, KAT. I'm out of here. I'm not spelling.
Oh
I
yeah,
know
yeah.
cat starts with an with like a T or something like that, or a cat
I
has
know there's
two
two
T's.
T's. Yeah.
So that was kind of my attitude. But I go in the first problem, and I sit down, and I kind of work it, and I'm doing all right. Like I feel a lot better about this one. I remember talking to people about it the day before, and going through like some of like the weird stuff and all that. And we get to the end, and the instructor was like, "Hey, how do you think you did?" And I was like, "I think I did pretty good. Hopefully I'm not mathematically eliminated. I know I was kind of on the border." And he's like, "Well, you got an 87." And I'm like, "Oh,
Yeah.
okay."
And that's like pretty.
That I
That's
needed
like.
an 84 or 5 to stay alive. So I was still alive. So I had one more shot. So I'm sitting there the rest of the day, and I'm kind of just talking to everybody. We lose a couple more people. I think we went down all the way to 8. So more than half my class failed, you know.
Yeah.
And so everybody knows my situation. All my good friends at the academy and stuff like that, they're all talking to me, giving me a pep talk or whatever. And it finally rolls around. It's time for the last problem.
Mhm.
And commercial break. No.
That's
Sorry.
funny.
Uh,
Wow, you're funny.
I no, maybe I
That
don't
was
know.
a silly.
I'm a good silly guy.
You're
Uh,
just so rarely ever like funny. No, I'm kidding.
oh God. All right. All right. Let's see if I'm on your next little podcast, you little twerp. Anyways. So this is like the attitude. I'm still like, I'm a little bit more like upbeat about it. I'm like, okay, this is possible. I have to get like 100 on this next eval, or I think it was like a 98. It wasn't a perfect score, but I have to be perfect. I have to be pretty dang close to it.
And it
So
is like most people like it is very rare, I understand, to get like a 90
it's rare to
on
get above like a
these.
95. Honestly, it's like like only like a certain amount of people get perfect scores on this. And
Right.
ooh, we're hyping it up. Ooh. Anyways, I sit down for this problem and it's janky. That's the only way I can describe it. So like
Mm.
there's part of the rules are that when you do like American 123 cross so and so at this altitude, if you as soon as you unclick the mic, even if you say go back and correct it, it's still a mistake. That's one of the like
Mm.
things. But if you keep the mic held down and say correction and then correct what you're saying, there's no points off and you keep it. And one of the
Mm.
things we had is that this guy did not have a certain equipment on his aircraft, and I had to point it out to a approach facility, and I said it like 10 times with correction, like November 1, 2, 3, the equipment correction, and like I bounce around on it for like 10 times, and then I finally get it like perfectly right on the last one. I unclick, and the instructor behind me goes, "There you go!" Like really, he was
Aw.
excited for me, and it's janky. I'm finally like the nerves finally hit me, but I'm not making any mistakes. I get to the end. It's the last plane. I give him the last clearance, and you kind of just sit there for 5-10 minutes afterwards. So like the scope will clear out. It's just you kind of just sitting there waiting on your fate. It's to make you
Mhm.
sweat a little bit. And
Mhm.
he sits there behind me, and he's like, "Son, turn around." I'm like, "All right." And he's like, "What did you need to pass?" And I'm like, "Sir, frankly, I needed a miracle." And he says, "Well, you got 100. You got a perfect score." And
Ah.
I was like shaking.
Such.
I'm just like shaking. I'm like, how did I do this? Now, I will say in a little editor's note here, I don't
Mhm.
think I deserved the 3, but I also didn't.
Yeah.
The same way, like I didn't deserve the 100, but I didn't deserve the 3. Um,
Mhm.
so I don't know if it was actually like perfect, but I mean, obviously it was good enough for him to say it was perfect, which is still incredibly rare.
Mhm.
So I think he knew that I needed some help, and he saw that I was trying and doing everything I could, and not being
Mm.
the biggest thing is not being a jerk about it, because they don't want to hire jerks. So
Yeah.
there was that, and part of the problem had like this weird thing that so these you go through these problems, and there's like a certain thing will happen in these problems, and they're like, well, you didn't teach us that in class, or the computer screwed up, and that's not actually supposed to happen for this type of aircraft or whatever. And one of those things
Mhm.
happened, and he's like, hey, can that thing happen in the problem? I recognized it, pointed it out to him, fixed the problem the correct way, even not being trained on it, because we had another person take it and I knew what was going to happen. And he's like,
Mhm.
hey, can you like print out that strip for me so we can show that and we can get it corrected for the next group? And I'm like, okay.
Mhm.
And I'm just like, my hands are shaking. I cannot physically type on a keyboard. I'm like on verge of tears, just like with like the final nervousness, excitement build up. And he's
Yeah.
like, and he's like, you signed some paperwork saying that you agree with the grade, and I signed that already. And he's like, he puts his hand on my shoulder and he's like, son, you signed the paperwork. I can't take it away from you now.
Aw.
So he's like, I
I feel
finally
like
get
I
it
just
out.
watched like an epic sports movie.
Yeah, it was
The
it was
underdogs
literally
finally pulled
the
through.
90-yard Hail Mary pass. Like that's what
Yeah.
happened. And so I finally get it out for him. And I walk out in the hallway, and then like the rest of the people that are left are just waiting in the hallway for me, because I'm the last one to leave the room.
Aw.
Because everything was they were talking about the problem and going through like, well, yeah, you did this right, but I would have done it this way, but you're not wrong. And they kind of go through it with
Mhm.
you, and everybody else has already filed out, and they're going through it like they want to do the computer thing and all that. And I step outside, and every single
Aw.
buddy person was outside waiting, and they say, "What happened?" And I'm like, "I passed." And they're like, "What?" And I'm like, "I got a perfect score. I made it. I passed." And like it was like sports movie of like, yeah, they put me up on like they didn't put me up on their shoulders, but it felt like I'm a big guy. They didn't put me up on their shoulders, no way. But it was like the big sport triumphant like.
Metaphorically, they crowd surfed you. Yeah.
Yeah, they're like cheering. I'm like we're
Aw.
jumping up and down. And like mom and dad had known that like I was still like I texted like in the middle of like the day. I was like, "Hey, I'm still alive. I need a perfect score or whatever." But it could
Yeah, I
happen.
remember getting an update every like 20 minutes that day, even if
Yeah.
nothing was going on, because mom and dad were like
Yeah. Well,
so so stressed out.
they were still working. And so I texted dad
Oh.
cuz I think like I was like, "Hey, thanks for your pep talk. I made it. Whatever." Because I knew I needed to call mom first. So I texted dad and I called mom, and mom was on a break at work from training somebody, and she's in like the
Uh-huh.
ladies lounge, and like I'm running, so the the where the problem's done, the equipment's all in like the basement, so there's not really good reception. So
Mhm.
I'm like telling the security guard, because they that's the other thing too, is like the whole time you're watched by a security guard, because they want to know if you're gonna like be weird about failing. So
Oh, right, yeah.
I'm going outside to call my mom. You can do whatever you need to do. I'm whatever, right? And he's like, yeah, man, go.
Mhm.
So I'm like running up the stairs, and I was a big boy then. I'm a big boy now, and I'm like huffing and puffing. I get outside, and mom's like, "Oh, honey, it's okay. We'll figure out something else for you to do. You can like, we'll find another job for you back
She
home and
didn't
all
doubt
the."
you for a second.
No, she was like preparing this whole day to tell like this like
Yeah.
to cheer up this very big sad boy. Like that was her whole plan. And like I'm
Yeah.
like, "Mom, I passed." And she like screamed, and like something happened with the phone or
Aw.
something like that. And her trainee picked it up, and she's like, "I heard you passed. Congratulations. I'll have her call you later."
Oh.
And then I called dad, and then
So
that dad
sweet.
cheered, and we were jumping up and down and all that. But yeah,
Aw.
that's the tale of the academy,
The the epic tale.
the epic
Oh,
tale. And
and
it
I
was,
guess, part two is you go to you get stationed in Puerto Rico.
yep. So funny enough, little tidbit teaser. Ooh,
Oh.
fancy. Ooh. So 2 weeks before our evals, we have like where I wanted to go out of the academy was Kansas City, and there's three of them on our projected list. So you get like a projected list of like have this many people pass or whatever. But 2 weeks before our evals, they come down with a list and they say, "Hey, by the way, uh, San Juan's going to be mandatory on your list, and their staffing's not that great. So 4 slots out of whoever pass, 4 people are going to go to
Oh my gosh.
Puerto Rico. So if 4 people
Oh,
pass, 4 people are going to Puerto Rico. If 10 people pass, 4 people are still going. That's
oh
how
my god.
it
So the
works.
bottom four that pass,
Yeah,
basically, because
yeah.
nobody's probably gonna choose it.
Nobody's gonna
Yeah.
choose it. Unfortunately, there's great stuff about Puerto Rico, and there's not so great stuff. But
Yeah.
they tell you that 2 weeks right before the eval, and one of the thing, and that's getting too much into the weeds here. But well, part of the thing I knew on the first day when I got that 3 on the eval was like, well, I'm going to Puerto Rico if I pass anyways, because I was
Yeah.
so like, regardless of like the math, if I pass, I'm going to Puerto Rico because I'm going to be in the bottom 4. So
Right. Yeah.
like the part of the phone call later, so mom called back later, and I was like, well, I need to get a plane ticket to Puerto Rico. Like and then yeah, that can be a whole other fun episode of life in Puerto Rico.
Mhm.
But
Yeah, I feel like it goes with the like, you're such a monolith to my friends because, well, even now you live far, but they know you as like the I.
it's
It's
the
you're hard to describe. I'm like, well, he lives in Puerto Rico and he got married in Vegas. Spoiler.
yeah.
And um, yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, and like I feel like to your friends I'm like the Canadian girlfriend. I had a buddy in high school, and
Yes.
he'd be like, I have to call my Canadian girlfriend. And we're like, oh, can we like talk to her or see some pictures of her? That sounds fun, dude. And he'd be like, you can't see her. She lives in a cabin. So
Right.
she doesn't. She only has like a rotary phone. I can only talk to her, and like it was like this whole like list of like, well, we can see
Right.
pictures, meet her, or whatever. But she lives in Canada, and like you wouldn't know her. She doesn't go here.
Yeah.
So
Uh,
funny enough,
yeah.
later I actually met her. It was
Oh, she was real?
she was real. I didn't believe she was real because
No way.
I was like, no way, she's real, man. That was
I've
like
been telling that story to other people. I'm
I
like,
met her.
oh my
I don't know if it was like actually her. Like I think he came up with the story and maybe slotted a girl in later, maybe if that makes sense.
God. Yeah.
But like it was like one of those things that there was like a joke in our friend group for years, and it's like, oh, I got a girlfriend. Oh, is she from Canada? Like that was our joke. But like
Yeah.
I'm
Oh man,
I'm
that's so funny that you met her. It's
I'm
so
your
full circle.
Canadian brother, like you know.
Yeah, yeah. For real.
But I am real
You're
mostly, I think.
real. Well, or at least, the guy I paid to talk on my podcast.
Yeah. So is the check in the mail or what? Like.
Oh, yeah. Oh, man.
But yeah. Then Puerto Rico, and then now I'm in California. It's a
Yay.
whole fun story. Well, first, I guess the first part of the 3-part story. I guess I don't even know.
Yeah. Well, yeah, speaking of parts, I think the question that I like to ask at the end of episodes,
Okay.
which is if you had to split your life into the before and the after, um, where does it split and how specific of a moment is it? Is it like, several years? Is it five
Yeah.
minutes?
Um, you've asked this question a lot, and I'm gonna tell you. I think I've argued with you this about before, but I don't like the question. I don't think life is split before and after. I think life
Mm.
is more like a book, and I think
Mm-hmm.
you go to different chapters of the book. I I
Mm.
I get what you're saying in terms of like before and after, and I think that's a very poignant thing. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't. I have the Texas growing up chapter. I have the chapter when I lived in Kansas, even the chapter of living in Kansas City, the Oklahoma chapter, the Puerto Rico chapter, and now the California chapter. I'm gonna be I'm halfway through the states. I just gotta get 2 more territories. But yeah, I don't like that. I don't like the question, and
Mm.
like I said, I'd rather my life be split up into chapters. I don't even
Yeah,
know if it was a before and after question. I don't think I'm on part 2 yet, if that makes sense.
that makes sense. It's funny how many people hate the question. um, it's a, yeah. Um, I think, and a lot of people, and people have answered it many like different ways. Honestly, few people have like a specific moment or even like a year long transition from
You're
like
right.
point A to point B.
And I'm not trying to
Uh,
discount those people, but like at the same time, you've got so much more to go. Even if you're
uh-huh.
older, I don't think there is
Oh
a
yeah.
before and after. Um, I mean, obviously your friends and the people you've interviewed, I mean, maybe with the exception of grandma, are
Mhm.
younger, you know.
Mhm.
And I would even argue grandma is still in the before. I don't.
Mhm.
It's my answer to the question is screw you. I
Fuck
don't like
you.
the question. Yeah, I don't like the question. Um,
Yeah. I think like for me there's like it's not that like I'm done like changing or the chapters are over. Like cuz I do have a very specific like feeling of like I was different before this event and now I'm
yeah,
different now because of
I
and like yeah, for me like I can measure time against this event. Like, oh, that was before student teaching. Oh,
mhm.
like that was, and I'm probably there's going to be plenty more before and afters in my life. I just think, like, for me, if I take an inventory of the 23 years I have, like, I measure things against my, like, horrible, horrible student teaching time.
Yeah, no, like as big brother, I'm gonna say
Mm-hmm.
it's always gonna change. There's nothing that's never not gonna change in your life. I mean, I've
Yeah.
proof of that. I've met people, met my wife, and done 100 different things since I turned 23. And
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
hope the same for you. Honestly, I hope that you to be gushy and weird. I hope you have a fulfilling and interesting time. I hope the good and the bad, and the good outweighs the bad. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, uh,
Well, thanks. Well, okay, so I guess if you know, you're not a before and after guy, you're a chapters person. Like, what chapter do you think you're on right now?
the chapter I'm on right now is I've kind of gotten to a point where like I'm in my career. Like I've gotten to like the final stage. I'm on the final boss. I am the final stage of where I am in my career, and it's just the maintenance now. It's just kind of like keeping up with that and keeping going. How do I be a good person? How do I be a good husband? How do I be a good brother? How do I be a good
Mm-hmm.
son? I think that's my mentality right now is how do I become better? I think
Mm.
everybody should have that mentality, but uh, the
Well, yeah, you
if
have
I
been
make
through a
funny
lot. I
noises,
think,
I don't
like,
have to keep going.
no, I mean, yeah, I think you've been through quite a bit in the last, like, since you started air traffic control school, and I think, I don't know, it's nice that you're in the maintenance of just like,
Hmm.
I'm just kind of enjoying the fruits of my labor now.
Right? So when my buddies and I played Call of Duty, we used to call it the dishes are done. You've done all the
Yeah.
work. You've done everything else. You can enjoy it now. You can sit on the couch and play Call of Duty or do what you enjoy. It's the dishes are done. You don't have to worry about that.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, I don't think the dishes are done upstairs. Funny enough, but that's a whole other that's a whole other issue I'm gonna get taken care of later. But yeah, it's if you wanted a hard answer out of me, I think the before and after would be before ATC and after ATC. So
Mhm.
that would be my answer. The first day I went to basics at the academy would be the start of the quote unquote after, but I could change my answer in 5 years. I don't.
Right.
I think you can look back on it and see some things, and like I said, I think I see it more as chapters in a book, but
Mhm.
I understand the question.
Yeah, it definitely leads to like interesting discussions even if everybody hates it.
Yeah,
So and I kind of, I think I kind of do it because people hate it so much because
yeah.
I don't know, people
It
don't
gets
like to talk
people
about
out of
themselves that
it,
much.
and
Yeah.
if you're passionate and you hate it, you're gonna talk about it. No, I get it.
Uh-huh. And yeah, when people hate it, then they start talking about why they hate it, and that's always like interesting. And it's because what I found is like people are very like measure their lives in like, I don't know, different ways, and like their memories, I guess. And
Hmm.
like everybody thinks that everybody else is the same way, and it's very funny to me because like I know some people that are like, well, mine is 3 acts. Some people are like, mine's chapters. Some are mine's before and after. Some are like,
Right.
I don't, there's nothing. And it's, but everybody else thinks that way. And it's like, no, man. So far, everybody's had a different answer. Anyway,
Well,
well, I hope we get you back on. Thanks for yapping with me.
no worries. Hopefully, I didn't yap too much or too long or whatever you needed.
You yapped perfectly.
I yapped
I guess
like a
shout out to
champion.
our family. Shout out Audrey, mom, dad, Kesnia.
Oh yeah, shout out all those people, and
Okay,
shout out
I'll
Sally,
stop.
my favorite
Oh
podcaster.
yeah, yeah. Shout out Toby.
Woo!
I won't say my favorite guest because I don't want to make
Oh,
the other
oh,
ones feel bad.
what do I have to
My favorite guest
do?
that I'm related to. So there it was, our episode on ATC school. Thanks for coming on, Toby. I love you very much, and I had a lot of fun talking to you. And if you like this podcast, everybody else, call your brother and do the dishes, and read To Kill a Mockingbird. Bye.